expert is a matter of relative, opinion. But what I'll do is I will just I have done it in a small presentation format. It helps to keep the flow of the thing good. So and I want to put a disclaimer here. Usually this kind of advice is highly personal, as many of you will realize that. And generally a one size fits all never works in all these things. Many people come and ask me, should I buy this, should I do this? My question is always that, when you are when you meet a doctor, the doctor knows your family doctor knows your entire uh, history, and he knows what works, what are the contraindications of a particular medicine, or what he should not do or he should do. So when you go to a new doctor and ask him some medicine and he doesn't know what is the contraindication of this medicine and what reactions it can have. So typically most of the advice tends to be like that, because somebody will come and ask, should I be doing this? Should I be doing this? Always in a context. We will talk about that. And I always am extremely reluctant to give advice to people, because it's a very sensitive topic. I can't ask him all his portfolio. I cannot know it. And without knowing it, whatever advice I give has a high probability of being wrong. Yeah. So I'm usually reluctant to do this. But so I will try to keep it in principle, some of these in principle, what is being done. So let's see whether it works. Uh, so, when one talks of retirement, the issues are obviously because the income has fallen suddenly. Inflation is an invisible tax that people do not realize. I will show you something later. And people are often confused about how to use the existing corpus. We'll talk more about this later. And what all to consider while selecting an investment, and should I manage it on my own or I should seek professional guidance? Again, this is highly debatable. People who can spend the time and think that they can analyze everything themselves well are okay doing it on their own, but most people cannot do it, and they probably need some help many times. Yeah. But this, again, as I said, is a highly personal matter. And give me a minute on this. It suddenly did not move. 1 minute. Can you see? Yeah. Uh, so there are three broad scenarios. This is very important, because there are case one is kind of people who are financially very strong and are actually looking to pass on wealth. I mean, it is for them, it is about passing on wealth to the new generation. They are well provided for in this generation. They are in a position where they are thinking more about how they should pass on. So these are one kind of people. Second kind of people is reasonable financial strength, but they have to judiciously manage, and they are okay to take somewhat higher risk, because it's not that they are hand to mouth. They have enough savings, and therefore, even though it may not be too much to pass on to next generation, but at least they are well provided for. And third is people who may think that given their current lifestyle and the way they have their expenses, they have just about enough. We'll talk about these in more detail, and therefore they need to keep it conservative. They don't want to take too much risk with where they invest, because they don't want to lose out something. The example that Sanjeev was talking about, if it happens to, of course it happened to Sanjeev much earlier in life, but if it happens to you today at 60, 65, it is difficult to recover from these. So obviously when you select investment, there are 5 things to look for: diversification, the risk you take, impact of tax on your investment, the returns it will give, and the liquidity. And liquidity is a very important thing at this stage in life. So broadly, I would say an asset allocation captures these 5 things, and I will talk about more about asset allocation. And basically, therefore, if you follow the right asset allocation, it will take care of all 5 of this. Just I talked about inflation just to give you a sense of how deadly inflation can be. Most of us assuming that we live for 20 years after retirement, 60 to 80. So I have taken December 0 to December 20. If inflation was what it was in India, or if it remains a 6.5, of course, this is a matter of opinion, what it can be. 100 becomes 25 at the end of 20 years. So you have paid 75% out as tax effectively in 20 years. So if you have 100 rupees today, just remember that 20 years later, that is worth 25 rupees of today. That's the impact of inflation. So it's humongous impact, especially if with lifespans increasing, this can be a deadly thing for people. And people who think, so effectively at the end of this period, you'll have to drop your lifestyle to 30% of what it is today. Effectively, this is what it means. And many times, as you get older, other expenses like medical and all that actually go up and don't come down, right? So, very difficult to predict the future. And the only thing that matters, and many people come and ask me often that, is this the right time to invest? Should I be investing now? Should I be putting in equity? Should I move money? I know in our WhatsApp group also, there are people who keep talking about, I moved my money to equity just before the elections, and I did this, moved it to this thing. But the reality is, if you do the right asset allocation, you win most of the time. Timing is very difficult to get right, and it is not important in planning your money. So, there is an analysis which says, I don't know whether I have put it later in the slide, 93.5%, there is one paper written, 93.5% of the return is attributable to asset allocation. 6.5% of the return, even by good fund managers, is attributable to right timing and asset allocation. Choice of instruments. Yeah, within that asset allocation. So asset allocation is extremely important, and therefore this generally macho feeling that I time the market, I move the market, I do this, I do that, is absolutely not recommended by me at all. Yeah, I know I have been quite on some of those posts in the WhatsApp group, but clearly I think that is not something that we should be doing, definitely at our age. So asset allocation fights inflation. It must fight inflation for you. It must give you liquidity and income when you need, right? And it should be accessible and usable when you want to use the money. And it must obviously grow and realizable at fair value, because there are many instruments which are good for returns, but their impact cost when you want to exit them is just too high, and therefore they are not recommended for this. This is again an example. Look at this chart, very, very interesting chart. In 2010, year 2010, gold was the best return earner and debt was the worst. And Nifty was somewhere in between, and S&P was even below Nifty. And look at 2019 here, S&P is at the top, gold is second best, Nifty is in the middle again, debt and liquid instruments are at the bottom. So, and if you see, there is not one asset class here which is consistently either at the top or the bottom or in the middle. Every asset class has had its day under the sun. So therefore, if you try and do every year this matching, this year I will be in gold and next year I will be in S&P and third year I will be in Nifty, the probability that you will get it wrong is extremely high. Because usually you would have made a decision based on retrospective data. So in 2013, because S&P delivered, you would have exited from Nifty and put it in S&P. And in 2014, Nifty delivered and S&P was next best. So it is never possible to time it right. And sheer data is against this great macho feeling that we can time the market well. Even the best of fund managers cannot do that. So coming back to the scenarios, in the scenario one where you have enough wealth, your thing is that you have enough to leave back for your next generation, and you are effectively looking at continuing to grow the wealth. Obviously, you take higher risks, put more money in equity. When I say equity, it again varies whether in direct equity or mutual fund. In this case, case one, maybe you can go to stocks, specific stocks. As we'll see, that is always not a good idea. It is better to remain in mutual funds. But in case study one, which is our people who are wanting to leave back wealth, I think investing in equity and even direct equity is not bad. Debt and REITs, these are okay, but you can have a larger allocation to equity overall. Yeah. And if you take case study two, where there is reasonable financial strength, yes, you will do a mix of debt and equity. Debt will probably be more than equity, but in debt, again, you have to choose more carefully. You will choose mutual funds and things like that rather than fixed deposits in the banks. I know I am a banker, but fixed deposits are not necessarily the best returns, post-tax returns instruments. And REITs now are a good instrument in India. They have become quite, and now there are a couple of REITs already, and there are more likely to come. So REITs are a good instrument. In the past, people have used rentals and real estate investments as a investment. I think increasingly that is not required to be done. I think REIT is a better instrument. In case study 3, look at the bottom chart. This is a very interesting chart. If you assume that your net of tax return, net of inflation, is -1, 2, or 4%, because these people remain in conservative, right? Case study 3 was people who have just about enough to last their lifetime, or they don't feel 100% confident that, of course, if you haven't saved enough and you don't have enough to last your lifetime and you are going to depend on next generation, that's a different ball game. Nobody can solve that. But if you have just about enough, but you want to assume that 20 years if you live after retirement, and if your returns were 2% and your expense that you want to spend every month as every year as a percentage of corpus is 3%, then you can still you have money for 54 years. But the interesting part is, if your expense of corpus is 5% and you are in -1%, which is what you are if you are in fixed deposits, the money will last you about 19 years, right? So that's this chart. But the problem is, if your corpus is very small and you tend towards 10%, you just have 10 years money if you are investing in -1% net of tax and net of inflation. So in 10 years, you're going to run out of your money. So, this case study 3 is obviously a very fine balance where you have to beat inflation. So there is an RBI inflation linked bond. So the returns go up with inflation. Debt mutual funds give you better tax efficiency, and therefore they tend to have a better post-tax return. And REITs are now a good instrument, but each REIT has to be studied in terms of its tax efficiency. Not all of them are the same. The way they are structured, it can change from REIT to REIT. So, and of course, many people end up making mistakes of putting into annuity and insurance products at the end of this period, which is absolutely a wrong choice to make, because most of the annuity products are in the -1% category in terms of net of post-tax and inflation. So if you look at the investments, there are capital appreciation type of investments and there are income generating investments. And equity, mutual funds, listed, unlisted equity, portfolio management services, real estate, gold, these are capital appreciation instruments, whereas income generation instruments are what I've said there: debt mutual funds, bonds, government saving schemes, REITs, and things like that. So just again, a very quick summary. Equities by and large are a good hedge to inflation. They have high liquidity. You can exit from them anytime. But you need to be long term there. I will talk about it a bit slightly later. In debt, it's a mix about inflation hedge. Not all debt instruments are good inflation hedge. For example, tax-free bonds and Bank deposits are not good inflation hedges. RBI floating rate bonds or senior citizen saving schemes, which are, you know, artificially overpriced, are good inflation hedges. You should look at that. Post office monthly schemes again are a good, they are again overpriced, because if you see, the rates are significantly more than the bank deposit rates. So they, but still they are just about, if 6.5% is the inflation, they are at the border of being an inflation hedge. And there in the investment horizons vary significantly. So tax-free bonds are all 10 years. There is some liquidity in them, but the problem is, again, when you go to sell, you tend to lose a bit of the capital, because you don't get the right prices for that. Gold, of course, there is now a very good instrument that government time to time comes, sovereign gold bonds. They open it up and you can invest in them, and these are very good returns, and actually they have done quite well. ETFs, again, gold ETFs are a good way to invest. So rather than physical gold, I think you should move back to things like sovereign gold bonds and ETFs. REITs, as I said, are a good inflation hedge and reasonably tax efficient. So if you see, each instrument has its tax efficiency, it has its own horizon, it has its own volatility, it has its own liquidity, and it has its own inflation hedge. So why tax is important? You know, most people tend to do fixed deposit or mutual funds and do dividend plans and assume that that is the only way to get regular income. But that is the worst thing to do, because dividend is taxable now, as most of you know. So the idea is to do a systematic withdrawal plans. I'm sorry for the short form there, SWP. It is better to put in growth mutual funds, and as it crosses 3 years, keep withdrawing, as so you land up almost paying no tax, because you get indexation and there is 20% tax, and if it's 6.5% inflation, you are already at zero tax. So the better way is to invest in growth plans and withdraw after 3 years from a debt mutual fund, rather than seek dividend from debt mutual funds. So taxable coupons are a very bad way to plan you lose money actually in doing them. uh, Withdrawal plans are much better and tax efficient. uh, so if I again go back to case 1, case 2, case 3, those 3 cases, obviously in the case 1 there is a high allocation to equity, as you can see, and debt is somewhat moderate, small, and alternates. You can even do more complicated investments like private equity funds and all other more complicated funds. Yeah. Whereas in case 2, you tend to be moderate on equity, which means uh, 30-40% at best, and maybe 60 to 70% in debt and debt side. Alternates is REIT golds are quite good, so you can do almost 10% of your money in these. In case 3, obviously it's a more complex situation, because you also in case 3 want some inflation hedge. You can keep up to 20%, but not more than that, because otherwise the risks are high. The problem with equity is, of course, the timing. When you need the money, markets may not be good and you may have to exit at lower prices. Equity is, again, very interestingly, you look at this chart. It is the number of years. If you see the column 1 there, in 1 year, there is a high probability your variation will be max 81% gain and minus 38% and 15% average return. But if you invested for 15 years, all these 3 become positive. Maximum is 17. The volatility goes down 17, 13, and 11. If you can see that there, right? If you invested for 20 years, the maximum, average, and minimum, all 3 are 11 there, right? So, so equity must be with long term. If you are looking at short term, again, as I said, those WhatsApp advices about let me move into equity, absolutely not done. So, in summary, strictly follow your asset allocation, and asset allocation also means rebalancing from time to time. If an asset class has overperformed, take money out of that asset class and put it back to balance your asset to whatever percentages you wanted. Uh, Follow it with absolute discipline. Don't be, this buy on dips, do SIPs. avoid tips. All these are just not done. Just stick to your principle. Don't be overactive on investment. Overactivity does not lead to better returns. And be cautious whenever you invest in bond funds. Look at their last portfolio. Look for credit risks. ILFS was there in many places. But if you, I'm not saying it as a this thing, but as Kotak, we never lent to ILFS. None of our funds had exposure to ILFS. And you can make out that some AAA bonds suddenly are not owned by some funds and are owned by others. So just don't go by AAA rating. Just have a look at what these are. That is why I always say that have a financial guide. It's always useful to have a financial guide, but choose a financial guide with whom you will disclose almost everything, right, about your finances. Don't give half information to him. He will give you wrong advice. And gold is a good inflation hedge. Some percentage of your portfolio must be in gold. And as I said, real estate, move away from real estate to REIT. So no daily Sensex watching. Avoid the hype and noise. Nobody has the right tips. Don't ever do it. Long-term investment is the way. Regularly keep investing and follow your asset allocation. So that's how I will sum up my this thing. I hope it was a bit generic, I know, but that's how I look at it. We can take questions at the end after the other two have.
It was a wonderful presentation, Manian.
Thanks.
Wonderful.
Yeah, very good, Manian. Great, wonderful. So let's move to now DC. DC V1.
Yeah, hello guys. Just a bit of background. After 82, I worked at TCS, and then during my time at TCS also, I was using my sister's funds basically because she wanted to put some funds in stocks, and so that's where I picked up the kind of knack for stock investments. And after that, in '89, when I came to UK, then also I picked up a bit of local investments here, and that's how I developed my interest in this stock investments. I invest purely in stocks, not in mutual funds, not in whatever debt instruments and others. And later on, I focused for some time on dividend, basically investment, i.e. looking for reliable blue chip companies that have high dividend and potential for high dividend growth. Before I get into details, actually, I must say that I am more of an independent. I have worked in the UK as a freelance consultant, earlier as a programmer, and then into finance companies, banks, and American Express and the like, and then later on in SAP. So I work with corporate finance, which is treasury module of SAP, if you know. It is like FICO is finance and controlling, that is highly generic, but I work with corporate finance module of SAP. So like derivatives and money market and everything. And on the reason why I'm giving you this background is so you know who I am, and then in a couple of minutes. Then working at one of these finance companies, that was a life and insurance company, the way, what I learned was that it is front loading. They take whatever contributions you make to the life insurance premium in the first 2 years or so. It goes, all the money that you contribute goes to the agent. So the 20 years that we talk about, that the money gets time to compound itself over 20 years, actually gets reduced to 18 or 17 or whatever number of years, because after that also some percentage of your premium is going to the agency or the agent who has sold the the policy to you, whether it's a pension policy or life insurance policy or whatever. Believe me, I do not have a pension policy. I do not have state pension. I do not have private pension. I might get some state pension, but I do not have a private pension, which professionals here in the UK normally would not do that kind of. But then I'm an independent and I want to keep things under my control for the reason that, for two reasons basically. One is nobody will look after my money better than I myself can do. Number two, whatever I'm going to contribute to the premiums and everything for the life insurance or pension plan or whatever I do, I'm paying my taxed money, and then when I go back to take the money, I'll be taxed again, right? But in the UK, where my focus is, the principles that I'm going to talk about briefly can apply to any country, any place, any market. But the FTSE, the UK index of stock markets, the equivalent of Nifty in India, has not gone anywhere. Believe me, it has not gone anywhere in the last 20 years. It is where it was back in 2000. I can share a chart with you because I'm a charts person. I look at one figure and interpret it in the right way and make my decision. So my focus is on stock investments, individual stock investments, blue chip stock investments, not long term. Long term is good, but if you look at Dow 30, for example, the American equivalent of Nifty, there are very few companies that were there like 50 or 100 years back. I don't have exact figures, but at the same time in S&P 500, another larger sized index, there is a company from 1780. I don't remember the name, but it's a very obscure company. But so my investment thesis is that I basically invest medium term. When you say medium term, it can be a month, it can be 3 months, but it is not like day-to-day trading. If the opportunity arises, if I invest in something and it has gone up, say 10% in 2 days, hey, take the profit and book it instead of waiting for it to drop. Besides, there are 3 factors that I look at. The stock does not have anything negative inherent in it. And number 2, there is nothing in the sector that the stock is sitting in that it can be regulatory, it can be general sentiment. I have nothing against sustainable, but I'm a neutral on the sustainable or ethical investing to begin with. So I don't focus on companies that are like sin stocks and tobacco stocks and all. I have nothing against them. Because the objective has to be clear, whether it is money making or supporting the businesses or supporting society. Yeah, there are other ways to support society and whatever you want to do. But if money making is your objective, then you have to do that with the right focus. Now, the way I look at it is basically there is fundamental analysis of stocks, i.e. looking at the balance sheet, cash flow, and so on. I do not spend any time doing that. I look at only the earning per share and PE figures and dividend sustainability if I'm looking for a dividend income from that stock. Otherwise, I look at the medium-term stock chart, for which there are a few websites. Of course, Google is there, but there's a website which I use regularly, and that is very useful. Gives me all the information I need to make the decision. So there are technical indicators defined by the gurus basically along the years, and every year a new one is defined, refining the information further from what earlier indicators were trying to communicate in one figure, instead of you pouring over hundreds of figures or thousands of figures in the balance sheet. Because balance sheet and cash flow and income statement can be manipulated. We all know that. There is GAAP earnings, there is non-GAAP earnings, and so on. Whereas the price movement of the stock is telling you what the market thinks, what the investors think, what the institutions think. And institutions have a big buying power. If a stock is being invested in by big institutions, that is a good indicator. If Warren Buffett, Berkshire is investing in a stock, that is being tracked on a quarterly basis. So, but I do not look at that. well, I look at that, but I don't make my decisions based on that because that is outdated by the time we get that information. So the only remind me about time, somebody. Yeah, I'm because I'm just talking. I'm sharing my ideas and my thoughts with you. I do not have any prepared material or anything, but if somebody is interested, we can do a separate session for details of stock charts, investments, and that kind of thing. And the way I look at it is, we talk of 4%. The figures that Manian gave was something like 4% is lost to the inflation. And if we are saying that we are getting 8% from whatever, dividend or interest basically in the FDs and all. So that leaves us with 4% or maximum, say 6% per year income or growth or whatever. So the way I look at it is basically, if I can catch a stock movements, a blue chip, when I say stock, not any stock, I'm not looking for stars like Tesla or NEO or these companies that will fly to the moon, but then you never know because they are moons, they are stars in the hindsight. Nobody knows today what will be the Tesla of 2030. So taking that viewpoint with that background, the way I look at it is, if I can make even 3% per month of my funds per month, that gives me a reasonable 20 to 30% per year. Yes, there is kind of regular involvement in the sense that you have to track your investments, but I don't invest in 20 stocks. I invest only in 3 stocks or 5 at the most, sometimes even 1. If I'm not happy with putting in my money in stocks, in any stock at one particular time, or I do not actually spot it, because believe me, there are at least 10 to 20 stocks, blue chip stocks, that are investable at any point in time. But you don't want to spread your money too thin, and you don't want to spend too much of your time spotting all of them at the right time. We all know, everybody says that, just a second. Yeah, everybody says buy low, sell high, but we are never told how to spot those lows and highs. Of course, you can leave an investment for 20 years, but not in FTSE 100. The money would not have gone anywhere if somebody in the UK had left their money for last 20 years. So the idea is to spot those 3 or 4 stocks whenever they are available. Sit tight on your money. There's no point in getting your money to work when it cannot do the money that you cannot afford to lose. So invest at the right time and then buy at the right time when the technical indicators tell you to get out of the stock, even if it is 2% profit on a monthly basis. And if you can repeat it 10 months in a year, taking 2 months break, then 20% is a handsome amount, I think. I'm not saying that you will do it when you are 70. Well, why not? We are all young, aren't we? Anyway, that's the way I look at it. Maybe, of course, there are other means, like you can buy a property and put it out on rent. That is another way. But then I don't think property will give you 20% return, not in terms of income return. But this is the way just to back up my thinking, I have repeated it in 2015 and 2016, when the market was going particularly nowhere, and in the UK market. And of course, with the S&P American market, where S&P has gone up from 500. I remember I was in Saudi Arabia in 2000, and I looked at it at a level of 500, and I used to think, where will it be in 2000, 20 years or 10 years later? And I had no idea, because I had not, looked at that aspect. I was not interested in American market per se, but being Bloomberg and those channels, they show all these indices. So now we are at 3,500, nearly 3,600. So 7 times growth. I'm not sure what Nifty has done during these 20 years, but UK market has not done anything, and that is the only way I could find that I can make money. And besides, Sanjeev Sharma mentioned something about 2000. Yeah, that was that episode brings back to my mind that when taxi drivers are discussing in stock investments, then that means it is top of the market. Everybody is talking about stock investments. Like right now, everybody is talking about Bitcoin, and that is in a bubble. But at the same time, Citi has said that Bitcoin will go to something like 300,000. Of course, it can go up to 300,000, but not in the next maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, who knows? So there's no time frame specified for this. Similarly, if you put away 10,000 in a blue chip stock today, there's no guarantee, believe me, it will go up 100% in 10 years. Look at the stock price of Pfizer. It has not gone anywhere in the last, I think, 10 years roughly. Before that it did, but I could be wrong. But what I'm saying is there are a number of blue chip stocks that have not gone anywhere. They have gone up and down. They have been volatile. Yeah, that brings another thought to my mind. We say, you must have heard, all of us, the saying, trend is your friend. But where there is no trend, you have to find another friend. And UK market is like that. There is no trend for last 20 years. So another friend then that I have found is volatility. Make volatility your friend. Use technical indicators to buy low, sell high, and ride along. Am I over time, or I don't know, I do not see the time.
Sanjeev is the timekeeper.
Sorry?
Go ahead, DC.
Yeah, so yeah, just stop me when you want to, yeah, because I'm just, talking as if it is.
DC, DC, 2 more minutes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you, I don't think we can look at a couple of charts, but then it is very useful. If you want, I can share that with you. Do you want me to share it with you, or?
Let's share it. That's what Madhav is saying, and make up. Let's share it in 2-3 minutes, whatever you have.
Actually, yeah. Phone पे वैसे भी छोटा दिखता नहीं है. It's better to send by mail or something.
You had a chart as a presentation.
Yeah, just a quick one,
Yeah, you can share your screen, right?
I was just getting to the screen. Yeah. See, this is the chart that I'm talking about. I hope, just give it a second for it to connect. Can you see my chart? Can you see my screen now? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Yes, yes.
John Mead is a very, famous name nowadays in in US particularly. You see, it has gone up from 120, let's say, to nearly 200. And then these indicators at the bottom, they tell you that it is high time. They will, drop. So these are the indicators, the green areas, that it will go down. Yes, the ride can carry on for a long time, because the first indication that this drop is coming came somewhere here. Yeah. So if you are happy with a ride from 120 to 130, 140 around, but then all this is a risk. And then it came down. So that is how. And this is a buying time, basically. When it's here, then you know that when it is rising up, it is going up, meaning time to buy. So these indicators can be used, not one indicator, but a number of indicators can be used together to make a judgment, keeping the safety of the stock in view, keeping the size. If it is a $10 million company, then obviously you don't want to invest in it because liquidity is low then. So that is how I have done and in the past I've done my investments. I've dabbled in derivatives also. I made reasonable amount of money in something like 1995, I think it was, or 97, and then lost partly on a wrong trade in options, basically calls and puts. But all this was based on these technical analysis and technical charts and that kind of thing. Fundamental analysis, it is difficult to make sense out of them because of reliability and interpretation problems. Yeah, I think that's it from me then. It is, yeah.
Great, DC. Thanks a lot. Good information and a different perspective, in fact. So let's hear the next speaker, Rajiv. Rajiv Goswami.
और डीसी और मनियन के बाद घर चले नहीं सब कुछ तो सुन ही लिया. I mean, it's very interesting to see the perspective that, I mean, Manian so structured, okay, do this, 1, 2, 3. DC is a bit on momentum, technical. Yeah, it's interesting. Personally, I mean, I started investing right after I started working. That also it's, and one of the best trades actually which happened was that time, because 83 or 84, when I started working, I had bought 200 shares in Shree Cement, IPO that time. 10 rupees ka share, 2,000 rupees I invested. And
Which
then
one,
89 I left it.
Rajiv, which one did you say?
Shree Cement, the
Shree
one
Cement.
which you helped to, yeah. So Shree Cement, 10 rupees per share, 200 shares, 2,000 rupees. And then 89 I left India. So I sold all the shares, whatever I had bought. And in between I had bought ACC, Tata Tea, Asian Hotels, which was Hyatt Hotel, etc., etc. And so when I left India, I sold everything except Shree Cement. Forgotten about it. Shares were with sister. So went to France, and after that, meantime, 20 years had passed. And suddenly one day, I mean, there was a regulation that, okay, once if you have the shares in physical format, then it cannot be sold. So then
That's
my
the one
sister
you
remembered,
called
you have
me
got
for.
Shree Cement.
Rajiv, that
Sorry?
is the one that you called me for.
Yeah, that's the one I called you for. Exactly. So my sister reminded, okay, now government says that you have to sort of get the shares in a demat account. I mean, where are they, So I mean, I looked at the price, So that time it was 20,000 per share. So the share for 2,000 is almost 40 lakh rupees worth. And so Manian helped to, I mean, long story short, Manian helped to get me back shares into the system. And finally, I sold them for 23,000 each, 46 lakhs. And but that's the best trade actually. I mean, I wonder how much it is compounded every year, 20% or what. So that's one extreme. And but yeah, I mean, overall, then I went to Paris, came to Singapore. In meantime, I didn't do much of investing. Came to Singapore, I had some friends who were also interested, so we started again. So even now, we have got a group of 3, 4 friends. I mean, we sort of exchange ideas, what is good, what is not good, how we should position ourselves. And then, okay, I mean, depending upon the risk tolerance, depending upon your portfolio, you want to take a position or you don't want to take a position, that's yours. Now, coming to that, my philosophy is, I mean, I'm not working since 2014. And so one of the principal objective of my investing is, number one, to sort of take care of the expenses, household expenses. And number two, to have the purchasing power intact and at least not to go down. Inflation wise, like Manian talked a lot about. So these are the two objectives that I have. And in the meantime, I mean, the third thing which I personally follow is that there is no competition with anyone. You have to be comfortable with what you like, what you don't like, what your financial situation is, how much risk can you take. There are n number of instruments which are available, and you can lose so many opportunities. That's also a part of the game. You will lose money somewhere. That's also a part of the game. But overall, I mean, if you do okay, I mean, I think hopefully you say that you will come out well. So I can see that like from 2014, when I stopped working till end of last year, I had in US dollar terms, I had an increase of about 57, 58%, roughly about 8, 9% per annum in US dollar terms. And but since this year to now, it has come to about 41%, because I mean, I'm still down about 11% this year. So, but I'm comfortable basically. So long as uh, the whole portfolio makes sense, it's fine. Coming back to the investment philosophy, I'm quite conservative in that initially. I would look at the bonds, and in the beginning of the career, let's say in 2008, 2009, I used to have almost 40% in bonds, because bonds that time, banks were sort of quite distressed for money. There were a lot of bonds which were issued at 8%, 10%, 12%. And so I invested about 40% there. 30% was invested in real estate or REITs kind of investments. And about 30% was in equity. Now, over a period of time, from then, the, the bond prices have been steadily coming down. And very often what I find is that if a bond has expired, I'm not able to sort of replace it by another bond. Very hard to do so. So after that, in which case then I move to some portion of fixed income, because I always like to have some portion in fixed income. So that one I move to preferred shares. So preferred shares is you can still find sort of coupon or dividend in the range of 7%, 8%, 9%. And then also, I mean, coming to those also, there is another sector which I like. Basically, I just operate like a hedge fund. So there is another sector which I like is the shipping part. Like in LNG shipping, you have the shippers which sort of do a long-term contract with major oil companies. So they do a fix their rate for 10 years. And the contracts are with good companies, strong companies. They have a sort of quite a visibility on the good cash flow. And on that, so to cover their expenses on ships purchase, they will issue sort of preferred shares at 8%, 9% kind of yield. So I like that kind of scenario where your cash flow is kind of visible, and okay, it gives you sort of, you have ships as collateral, and you get a return of 8, 9% per year. So I mean, I like those kind of stuff. It's quite a lot which is there in LNG shipping. It's there in container shipping. We have long-term contracts, and but when the bonds are very low, I like those. And of course, I like REITs as well. I mean, REITs are pretty much a part of a stable portfolio. So currently, what I have is I have about 16% still in bonds or fixed income, and about 21% in REIT. So roughly, it's about 33%, which is in this core portfolio, which is income generating. After that, I mean, okay, given when I see the government sort of printing money, etc., and I put about 12% in gold. So I mean, that's a sort of hedge against something which happens, you know. And then rest is against sort of equity. Now, equity-wise, I mean, generally, I just look at companies which are sort of, if there is a price earning of say less than 10, about 6 or 7 kind of thing. So good companies and good dividend. So I mean, I will just buy a portion of it. But at the same time, I mean, overall portfolio, my thumb rule is that don't buy a company more than 3%. Any company, nothing more than 3% in any investment. So, and then, I mean, you keep on choosing, we keep discussing ideas with the friends, which sector to allocate and how much, how to do it. And yeah, so that's what we do. So there are few points actually which I want to mention. Normally people are quite scared of equity investing. And my view is that the cash flow is important. And as retirees, you have to be sort of have a reasonable amount of money to one side to cover for at least 1 year expense There can be some sort of medical contingency which you have not planned for. So you keep that some part of money there, etc. So once you have covered all this, and if your cash flow is still more than whatever you need for household expenses, then the market coming down is your friend, because you can always buy a company, good companies at a cheap price. And a company which is making 10% or 12%, 15% return every year, it cannot stay low, And so long as, I'm a bit different from DC. Like I say that I don't invest more than 3 or 4% in one company. So, but if you have many companies like this, and you have different sectors, you can put into mining, banks, insurance, shipping, petrol, uh, real estate, gold. So if you diversify enough, I think it gives a peace of mind. And I'm quite sort of comfortable when the market is coming down, because I know that, okay, whatever cash flow is there is there. I'm not worried about that. And after that, I can still buy something which is at a reasonable price. So why worry about it? And yeah, that's what I would say. Lastly, I think the tax angle is very important. I live in Singapore, where there is sort of zero tax on whatever investment you make. You make loss, you make gain, that's your baby. But at the same time, for example, if I buy Chevron in US, if I buy Total in France, and if I buy Shell in UK, so these three petroleum companies, the dividend from Chevron is taxed at 30% as a withholding tax. Total is taxed at 35% withholding, and Shell, being in London, is not taxed at all. So you have to be mindful of those kind of subtle nuances which kind of affect the market, because in the long term, it makes a big difference. If you're in Germany, every dividend you pay is 35% goes to government. At the same time, if you are buying a Netherlands company, then it's only 15% dividend. So those kind of things you have to be aware of. And yeah, that's how I run the portfolio. But in short, it's kind of a bit like hedge fund. There is everything all over the place. If I like something, I would just buy it. Look at the business. If I'm comfortable with the business, like the numbers, like the profit they are generating, management is good. It's kind of shareholder friendly. It's always good to have a dominant shareholder in a company which can keep a control on the management. If it is owner-based sort of a company, how much is the debt? Yeah. So you look at all that, and you just sort of decide to invest in. That's what I can say.
Thanks, Rajiv.
Let me see if I've forgotten any point.
Sanjeev, a few
Sure.
things I would just add or clarify or whatever, which I probably didn't touch upon. One is that at least it's true of all over the world, and it is true now in India. If you are doing equity investments through mutual fund, do choose ETFs and direct plans. Yeah, they are significantly cheaper, and you save a lot of money, and the power of compounding is a lot. Like Rajiv said, every tax that you pay or every charge that you pay matters over a long period of time. So that is one thing. Second, I just wanted to tell people that if you do go down that path of equity and mutual funds and all that, or even direct equity stocks, I think if you are, of course, see, obviously you saw some difference in the approach that DC has to investment vis-a-vis what I said, and this is where those categories are very important, right? DC is obviously in a category who has significant risk appetite, and he spends a lot of time on the markets and on the stocks and on technical analysis, right? So any of you who's trying to do what DC is doing, be warned that then you must spend the same amount of time, energy, effort, and expertise on reading charts. Reading charts is an expertise by itself. Not all of us can read it. I can't claim to read the charts well. So it's a different style, right? So please choose your styles carefully. Don't necessarily, of course, some of you might resonate with what DC is doing and you have the ability to do it. Of course, you should choose to do it. But otherwise, generally, for most people, like DC mentioned that I do 3 or 4 stocks at a time. It should be anathema to all of you, right? If you are not
very concentrated.
if you are not doing what DC is doing, right? So DC has a style which may not be applicable to all of us. Of course, it may be a great style if you have the same, if you put the same energy, effort, expertise into it. So, but in general, I would say that most people should tend to stick with, fund managers. Direct stocks, if you buy, for example, after all I said, 70-80% of my wealth is in Kotak stock. Yeah, and it's high concentration, right? But I understand that concentration well, right? I am almost an insider. I know what is going on in the company. By the way, Kotak stock has delivered better compounded annual returns than Google has, right? Google's last 10-year annualized returns are 18% or some number like that. Kotak's is 35%, right? So we are double of Google. I understand that risk. I understand that, and therefore I am comfortable having 70-80% of my wealth in one stock. But it is not for, if I was not in Kotak, there is no way I would have done it, right? So direct equity investing, concentration is a huge thing. You can lose your shirt and pant on concentration, right? So
So
be
is
very.
is that insider trading then, Manian? You said
I'm not
you
insider.
wouldn't have done it if you were not. No, that's okay.
No. I have my
So
ESOP.
one of the things that I was
It is-
looking for, or so one of the things that
Sorry, one minute. Huh? So
Onion,
therefore, of course, if you create a portfolio
actually
after
for all of us.
studying
Right.
well of 10 stocks, they can be fantastic returns, right? 10, 15 stocks. But you have to, whether you will get it right, whether you will get it better than the normal fund manager. Personally, I think most people cannot get. DC is a different breed, right? DC understands that he can generate better returns than a fund manager. I would guess that most of you will not be able to. I will not be able to. Okay. So
the thing is, Manian, anything that is worth doing, and if you no, my belief is nobody will look after my money better than I
I
myself
understand.
can do.
That's a
Number one.
I'm
And
not
number
disputing
two,
your philosophy, but your philosophy has certain other things that go with it, right? You must carry it through, right? Which not
yeah,
many people carry through.
yeah, yeah. And of course, if you with that objective, you have to spend some time, which I have. Now I'm comfortable with that style and that thinking and that execution of my plan. And it does not take long, believe me, to to learn this and put it in place.
Yeah.
Manian, I have a question for you.
Yes.
You recommend gold as a hedge against inflation. Why gold? Why not commodities in general? And why not currencies?
Yeah. So, of course, in India, currencies is very difficult to do, but for some of you who are abroad, currencies are a possibility. But my own sense is that the kind of hedge gold provides against inflation, neither currency nor commodities can provide, for the simple reason that gold is, you see what is happening now. As the interest rates have moved, gold has, in fact, gold works against currencies as well, right? Currencies move in opposite direction to gold. In most of the time, dollar will move opposite direction of gold, right? So when gold moves, it is usually against inflation. But when dollar moves, it is not necessarily a hedge against inflation necessarily, right? It may move in the same direction. Actually, gold and currencies generally move in the opposite direction.
Okay, thanks.
If
So
you are
I feel
thinking
that
of
I
currency,
just add to Manian's story,
Yeah.
the currency is when you can buy dollar and you can sell euro. But when Fed is printing dollar, ECB is printing euro, Japanese are printing yen, British are printing pounds. It's everybody is printing. So, selling one thing which is going down against the second thing which is also going down, it's not a real hedge, because end of the day, the amount of notes in the world is going to be huge, everything combined. And
Right.
that is, gold is a hedge against all that.
That's
But dollar against euro is not a hedge.
And commodities, by and large, I would say that, again, too volatile for a common person to handle. And there are too many dynamics in, see, you know, when you do equity of, say, India, most of the people here, let's say India, the number of dynamics to handle is very different from a commodity. Commodity has too many dynamics and too much volatility. I would say generally commodities will have higher volatility even than equity. Maybe a few exceptions in commodities, but generally they will be more volatile. And for, again, I am just keeping in mind that I am talking to 60-year-olds, right? So, so I would say volatility is something that 60-year-olds don't want to take too much of, right? So if I was talking to a 30-year-old audience, I would of course tell them to do commodities and stuff like that.
Okay,
Well,
Manian,
just to add to
I have a
what
question,
Rishi
like,
has
on this.
commented, I was saying that Swiss franc is the only stable currency that you can consider uh, getting hold of and holding on to. Long term, if you look at it, it has gone up even against dollar.
But you know, DC, let me tell you one thing. This was the belief that Swiss franc is the most stable currency. And India, many corporates lost writing derivatives on Swiss currency. Hell of a lot of money they have lost. Okay.
Depends
So,
which side of the trade you are on.
I know that, of course.
Yeah,
Of course.
so don't forget that money.
Yeah.
You had a
Okay,
question.
yeah, Manian, I have one question here. Yeah, go ahead, Tekri. You go.
Tekri?
Tekri, you go ahead.
I think Sanjeev, you had a question. I don't have a question. Sanjeev, you go ahead.
Yeah, see, the question I
I
have,
was
you
just
know,
making a
basically,
comment on, yeah.
the question is to like Manian and DC. When we look at a stock, normally you go with P to E ratio, right? Profit to earning, price to earning ratio. So there was a time, when 17 to 18% was supposed to be a reasonably good thing to look at. Anything beyond that would be risky. What is that nowadays? Is it still 17 to 18%?
No, it's over 30%. It's over 30 right now.
Yeah, like S&P is trading
Yeah.
currently
At least
at
in the
more
US.
like
I don't know
25.
about India.
S&P is trading
Rajiv was
25.
mentioning this. In a low interest rate scenario, what is happening today, if you look at what is happening is, the debt returns have just plummeted, right? Because the interest rate scenario is so low, the debt returns have just plummeted. So any money to get any return has to move to equity. And what that has done is created a bubble on equity, and all the PE ratios are out of whack completely compared to what they were 2 years back. So, these things, again, please do not, as investors, do not please get into all this as common investors. 17, 18, 20 doesn't matter. It will be 17, 18, 20 at some point in time and 25, 30 at some point in time. And these things keep changing, and it is to do with a lot of other dynamics in the market. Yeah, obviously today, even in India, the P ratios are 25, 30 very easily, right? Many companies, because money is chasing equities because they can't put money in debt, because you have negative real returns on debt today in India. If you put money in fixed deposits in India with a decent bank, 1 year returns are 4.5%, and inflation is running at 6%. So you are at minus 1.5%. So what do? So you decide that, okay, boss, equity mein 8% bhi aaye to chalega, it is better. So put money in equity. So P by E ratios will just drop. I mean, just shoot, sorry. So don't go by all this. It's not.
As long as you have at least, I would say, 7 years or so for equity, right? And to Goswami's point, because everybody is printing money now, it has to show up in the equity. So if you invest in equity right now, of course, you will get, that's why we are seeing all the high S&P and Dow and, anywhere else.
Yes.
Right?
Again, liquidity.
Because that's where the money is showing up. Money in. So, when, or Goswami, when we print this lot of money, let's say Europe as well as the US and some other regions, where does that money show up? Is that equity? Because where is this money? Where is the wealth going?
Tesla.
Right. So basically equity in general. That's what S&P 500 is, right? or
Yeah.
some other, index.
Agree, agree.
So
The
that's
thing
what
is,
it is. Yeah.
agree. The thing is, Dow and S&P and all these equity markets are having their day, will have their day for a few more months. After that, the rotation will start.
Yes.
See, that's how they rotate within the sector, these professionals, fund managers and so on. Then they rotate within the emerging markets and so on with different countries, different geographies and so on. Then they rotate within the different markets, i.e., whether it is commodities or and so on.
Right, I agree, DC. Let me add to your strategy. The charts that you shared with us. So will it be advisable, DC, specifically for you and everybody else, actually, that according to your chart, I think now will be the time that we can anticipate a downturn in the equity market in general, right? So from now on, do the dollar cost averaging or rupee cost averaging, whatever you call it, so that, you don't try to go in at one time based on your chart even, because we are anticipating the downturn. Let's put $500 a week or something, in stock index in general, so to speak, because we are anticipating that downturn. Will that be a good strategy to follow? By the way, even though I advise this, I don't do all these things, because in my case, my comment was going to be, it's the quality of life that I would go for. The moment I get into all these details, to Manian's point also, then what is the money worth for? If it's not really helping me increase my quality of life. And that goes a little bit against DC's point here, because he has to spend a lot of time, obviously.
No, I don't
But
actually.
anyway, to add to DC's point, here's a strategy that I think I can think of right now, that, you start investing now, few $100s per week or per month, because we are anticipating that downturn. So go ahead, this, what's your comment on that strategy?
No, I don't spend too much of time, Dekri and others. It is basically, say, 1 hour or 2 hours at the most a week, right? Because I have identified a subset of stocks that I want to monitor, and I just look at them once or twice or 3 times a week, and that's it.
Right. No,
Right?
you don't have to defend DC. I'm saying,
No,
you are at a stage where we are
No.
not. But talk about the strategy.
Yeah.
Agree. One thing that will happen, this liquidity thing at some point in time has to unwind. Okay, there will be some pain of that unwind that will happen at some point in time. When, I don't know. Whether it will happen in next 6 months, it will happen in next 1 year, because if this corona effect takes 1.5 years more to fully unwind, the whole liquidity thing also may take that long to unwind. So there will be some exit pain from this liquidity. At some point it will come. So one has to be mentally prepared for that. So I would say that, again, like I always say, for a general investor, timing is not the best thing to do. But having said that, for next 12-18 months, will the market look okay? I think my guess is that they will look okay. But around 12-18 months, I think the unwind will start, and that's when the pain will come. That's my feeling. So then you decide where you want to put what money.
And to counter that, to kind of incorporate that, because we cannot really time anything, whether it's the upward or downward, right? That's why the dollar cost. So because DC talked about the anticipation based on that chart, right? So whether it's the US election, whether it's the corona, whatever you start investing. And so basically I am saying, rather than trying to time the market, follow the dollar cost averaging when you anticipate that trend, whether upward or downward.
I
So
don't know.
in my case, if I want to talk, if I want to talk about, let's say, my strategy here, for a long time, because I know Goswami and DC both talked about what they have done, right? So in my case, I chose a long time ago 2030 funds, or balanced funds, or retirement funds, or freedom funds, whatever you call them, right? So, and that really basically they adjust the equity versus bonds over time. And that goes to your point also in your, very academic generic presentation you did, Manian. So now what the strategy I was thinking just a day or so ago, I could take it because right now the stocks are really at high points, so to speak, again, who knows, we cannot time it. So rather than 2030, can I just switch it to, let's say, 2010 or 2020, where the equity is really at low, because bonds will be at high, right? Because it's passed already, right? So my current portfolio would look like 2/3 about equity, 1/3 bonds in that 2030 scenario. So I switch it to, let's say, 2010, where I might have 66, 70% bonds and only 20 to 30% really in the equity. And then when you see the trend going down, like, when the market is low, that you are saying about 12 to 18 months will be okay. Who knows when? That time switch it to 2030 or even 2040, where I am more invested in equity. But at the same time, no matter what happens, I will still be okay. So that is
You
your
will still
strategy
be
that I
okay,
have
no
followed,
matter what happens.
because Goswami, you shared it, the CEO shared it, so I shared mine, that's all. Very simple. And that way I just stay calm. I don't even pay attention, so to
No,
speak.
actually, I mean, that's what I say, once you know your cash flow, you will not be disturbed, frankly. I mean,
Right.
but despite that, I mean, I must say that this year in March, I mean, I was really stressed one day. I mean, one day I literally, when you see the portfolio down from 38%, and I was long cash beginning of the year, because I thought market is too high. But moment there was a correction down below, I mean, I again went into everything, and then the big crash come, and suddenly you are down 35, 38%. And I still have responsibilities, and so I was quite stressed. But coming to your point, I mean, I think if I have money, and I was thinking about this because market has gone up quite a bit. I mean, whether you see banks or you see petrol or you see the stock market has moved up. But at the same time, I mean, I see that gold has corrected down. So 1800 is the goal now, or 1780, 1790. So, I mean, what I do is I look at the gold companies and see which will make money at this level. And there are a lot of gold companies which have a price earning less than 10. And they are all debt free now, almost everybody. So, I mean, what I do is to look at the gold companies. I mean, I have a 12% allocation in gold. I can easily move it a bit more. So I'm looking for gold companies which make at least better than 10% return, even at current gold price. And the direction, what I see is with the level of stimulus, which is still coming, still going to come next year, and for some time, I mean, looking at the unemployment, etc. So it's a reasonable bet that at least the gold price will hold. I mean, so yeah, that's how I would look at that, to buy a gold company.
All right. Who else can share their personal experience that hasn't said? Madhav, go ahead.
What essentially I'm going into stock up to now. If Manian said he invested every 70% in Kotak, I've invested 100% in myself. And I've been okay. I've had my ups and downs as well, and right now I'm in a down, and that's one of the reasons why I thought I will diversify. And I'm trying to understand this market and terminology. So in terms of investing elsewhere, I'm totally new into equity, so I'm at total knowledge.
Madhav, I tell this to many of my clients, the mid-market kind of clients. Like you, most of them invest 100% in their business, right?
Yeah.
And they think that is the best business to be. I always tell them that, yes, you should invest a large proportion, but it should not be 100%. And you have to think of the individual as separate from business.
That is the bit I'm
The
struggling
business
to
must
make.
have a life of its own, and the individual and his family must have
Yes.
a life of their own. And the two need to
Absolutely,
be planned separately.
I admit my weakness. That is one of my, I recognized it a few times. In 2008, I recognized when the market crashed, and then again I fell into it. And therefore, what did I do? I invested in my kids, sadly. But I need to now, I'm thinking of putting aside in equity. I did properties, of course, but then I'm thinking of equity now. And this is where that was my interest in coming, and I'm going to look at from a UK point of view. But Rajiv, you seem to be investing in different parts of the world. Whom do you use?
What do you mean, whom do you use?
You said you invest in France and Germany and Netherlands.
Agents.
Which broker or something?
Agents. Agents, brokers, yeah.
I just use the banks.
Oh, your banks. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is banks here in the UK also offer this, facility, but they charge you a leg and an arm. I used Barclays stockbrokers long time back in the beginning. And then later on, these online brokers came along. I don't know if online brokers are common in Singapore, where you are, right, Rajiv?
Yeah.
Like in the UK now, they charge Fiverr for any size trade. You can do a trade for £1,000 or you can do a trade for £200,000. Doesn't matter. And in the US, I know that there is no commission fee basically. They do not charge you anything for doing any trading, any size, any whatever, as long as, of course, you have the money.
Which are the portals the US guys use?
Mostly Fidelity. That's what I use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you see, the trouble with me.
Yeah, I have actually, in the US, because I worked for multiple companies, and the 401k managers are different institutions such as Fidelity and T. Rowe Price and JP Morgan, all that. So I happen to have accounts with all of them, and lately I have been focusing more with through T. Rowe Price and Fidelity. And Fidelity, by the way, gives you the option of buying into the T. Rowe Price or JP Morgan or all other things as well. So in that sense, Fidelity, by far, it's the largest holder of money, even bigger than Vanguard these days. But from expense point of view, I think Vanguard is still the king.
Vanguard is supposed to be cheaper.
Is it an online platform? Is it an online
Madhav, of course, Robinhood is more in US, but I am sure they have something in London. You should try Robinhood.
Robinhood,
Actually, but Madhav, what I would say is just one point, If it's a UK national, if you buy US stocks, then supposing you pass away, so whatever is the value of US stocks, 40% would be estate taxed by the US government. So you keep that in mind always. For foreigners.
In UK also is the same thing, UK stock as well.
Yeah, so I mean, as a foreigner, you have to be mindful that, okay, it's good to invest in US, there is a sort of gain and all that. But if you don't plan the vehicle properly, then you can end up paying 40% of your money just as tax.
Yeah. So right thing will be, I'm sure, of course, I don't know the UK market. I am sure UK has feeder funds which invest into US stocks. So the feeder fund act as local, they become local investment for you.
The point of tax. They are the point of tax.
They are the point of tax. So you have to think of that. Of course, I don't understand the UK market. DC may know something more.
DC and myself had a chat because now I'm planning to do that.
So for example, India also has feeder funds which invest into FANG and things like that, right? So you can invest in some. So for example, Franklin in India has a feeder fund which invests in US opportunities, and so I invest in that fund here. So there are structures like that possible which overcome the problems that Rajiv just mentioned.
Exactly, so but you have to be mindful.
Yeah.
We are kind of touching onto the estate planning, so to speak, and will and whatnot.
60, you got to do that.
That is a great topic by itself.
Yeah, right, exactly. So
Especially in the
my
Piani.
understanding is, hey, US folks or anybody else, maybe enhance my understanding. Even if I do not have a will, or I have, since I'm in the US already, so that 40% hopefully won't apply, death tax or whatever. So even if I don't have a will, wouldn't it pass to next kin on, my wife and spouse and all that?
No, it will
Will
not.
is not,
It will,
will is not necessary always, right? Sanjeev, yeah. Go ahead.
no, will is.
Laws in US, but for those in India, I can say, I don't know the laws in US, so I can't comment on that. But in India, it's very clear that there is, of course, if you write a will, it goes as per the will. If you do not write a will, depending on, there is a Hindu Succession Act. So if you are a Hindu, it will go as per the Hindu Succession Act. And that process can take you to get a probate from a court is a process of at least 1 year at best, 3 years maybe, sometimes 1 to 3 years it can take you. And then it will go by the Hindu Succession Act, and the division happens as per that. But if you write a will, and then it goes by the will. But will again has to be probated. But will takes less time. If you have a will, either you can register a will. If you have registered the will, it can be probated very quickly. But if you haven't registered a will, it can get probated in a year's time. But if you haven't written a will, the whole thing to get a probate and get the court decree on the exact devolution of the assets can take
Makes sense.
2 to 3 years.
Right. That makes sense.
I can just tell you,
And
probably US also is the same thing.
no, it is not. In the US, it is not. In the US, like,
No,
you
no,
know,
I'm talking about UK. I'm talking about from UK point. In
Okay,
UK, if
okay.
you die without a will, you're told that you died intestate. So which means that it 75%, it goes to wife and then split between the children automatically, whether you want to give it or not. But if the wife is not there, then it's serious problems.
And
So
if you have
what
multiple,
happened?
and if you have multiple wives, then you have even more bigger problems.
No, you can't have one. No? That's the trouble.
I mean, ex-wives.
But I know in India, you got to register the will. Otherwise, every single relative known in the world can claim and put a claim on it. It happened to my aunt when we were in 1980.
It takes time, because then they people get time to come and contest it in court. If you haven't, then
So what is it in the US, US guy? Maybe Sanjeev Sharma, go ahead.
In the US, like, you know, you have to write a will. If you do not have a will, say for example, you have a bank account. Okay. So there you can, you know, get away by just putting the nomination. If you do nomination, it goes to your son or daughter or whatever, whosoever you write to, you know. But for all other assets, you know, you have to specifically write a will.
Oh, really?
Yes,
For all the stocks.
It doesn't go to your king automatically.
Let me clarify. This happens to us as a bank all the time. Nomination is not legal transmission. Nomination technically is still holding in trust. If the will is different from the nomination, the nominee is holding in trust for the final guy
rightful distribution.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So Benny, what's the use of beneficiaries? Yeah, Ramesh, go ahead. Beneficiaries also let's include. Yeah.
You go visit a family lawyer and get an irrevocable living trust. Okay, you create that, and that has got a lot of detail into that. Okay, and you can actually specify a lot of things in that, and that is completely probate free because that is actually registered.
So that is what I have done.
Yes.
I have created an irrevocable trust. I have moved some of my assets there. Of course, in the irrevocable trust, I am still one of the beneficiaries, and I have not marked the percentage beneficiary to who is how much. So there are multiple beneficiaries. So what that does is the problem of will gets taken care. But to the extent I have not transferred assets, I have not transferred all my assets into an irrevocable trust because I have kept some of my assets outside. For that, I still have to have a will. So because you very rarely have all your assets into the trust. So Of course, you can do
Yeah,
it, but
I think my recommendation is at this point in our lives, we should do that because at the rate at which our guys are all popping, you know.
so I have already a irrevocable trust.
So
When,
Ramesh,
when
or
when my
anybody.
father died, you know, he didn't leave
So,
a
so
will.
does it make so guys? Does it make sense to have a special, a separate session for that
Yes.
estate planning?
Yeah,
Yes.
So estate planning
But
is a
you,
subject by
but you
itself.
need a lawyer. We shouldn't kind of arbitrarily do this. We need a legal guy who can
Legal
actually
lawyer, right,
It
right.
varies from
So
country to
Dikshit,
country.
Dikshit, why is there?
But Ramesh, you are right. That's a valid point. Without, somebody knowing the law.
Yeah.
The
And it's
problem is
different in every
complicated,
state,
more
okay?
complicated.
No, it differs from country to country.
And
Yeah,
state
one-
to state.
And
1 minute. Let me, Bruce, the
Yeah.
problem is more complicated because what is happening now is our generations are not living in the same countries, right? So when I form the trust, I must make sure that the trust satisfies the legal requirements of US because there is a possibility that my daughter may settle in US and
Yes.
then we can have serious problems.
Oh, boy.
Or the trust can have serious problems of having not met the US law. So,
But then,
estate
but then,
planning
Manian, the trust is based in India, so Indian law should apply, is it not?
no, but when the daughter benefits it, she'll have to pay the US taxes.
No,
For
but she will
example-
pay only if she gets it, and she has to get it in India.
No, but what happens
नहीं
is,
नहीं नहीं वैसा नहीं है.
no.
ऐसा नहीं है.
She can't get it in India. Even if she gets it in India, her world income is taxable in US.
So it
Yeah.
will arise, the income will arise only if she gets it.
Yeah, but then the problem is the US has a law which says that accumulated, undistributed profits of the trust also have to be tax paid in US.
Yes.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
I'm,
so all
I'm
those
not
complications happen.
no,
So
no,
there
I'm-
are, I mean, I don't want to get into the technique.
No.
There are lots of
No, I
complications.
think
That is
somebody
one
was
of the reasons.
suggesting that we should have a different session for this.
I think
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
This
So
is
Ramesh,
Big by
Sorry,
big.
Ramesh,
this is the
very
reason why
briefly.
Boris Johnson became a non-citizen of US. He was holding US citizenship because US has a global reach.
Yeah, India too, by the way.
Yeah. But in terms of taxation and declaration itself,
Same. India also now.
Yeah, more and more countries are doing that now, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not
Right,
only is
right.
it taxation in the US, you actually have to declare to the Treasury every year what your assets are.
yeah, same here.
Yes.
Yeah. So
In the
whether
US,
you
yes.
taxed or not. So
So
that
that's
is
a
something
topic
that
by
I
itself,
bitterly
and,
learned about.
And that's why I feel blessed. Actually, I don't have any
It's
asset at all
compulsory.
in India or anywhere besides US.
So
I
Subra,
never
if you
inherited
ask
anything.
me,
Hey, guys, I just want to come back to what Dinesh was talking about in the thing. In the UK, the Nifty 50 has not gone anywhere for 20 years, you said, right?
Yeah,
FTSE.
FTSE.
Oh, sorry, FTSE.
Yeah.
yeah, I understand.
FTSE. So that means it's operating in what is called a range-bound market.
Correct.
It goes up and comes back down, goes up, comes back down. But at the end,
Correct.
it's back to where it started. So I just want to share with something I picked up because I thought that this period coming ahead is going to be in that same zone for the US. So just in case I have no, can you read it?
Yeah, active value
Yeah.
investing.
Active
Value investing.
And the guy's name is Vitaly Katznelson. He's got a fund.
Can you hold it up, please?
Yeah.
Can you
see
put the name of the author in the
Chat
it?
box.
I'll put the chat thing.
Or,
But I think it's worth looking at it because he talks about the market that he calls it a cowardly lion. Okay, it's brave and then it becomes fearful and goes back again.
yeah.
So it keeps doing that back and forth.
उसको 20 पेज में नहीं लिख सकता था, 200 पेज में लिखा है, 500 पेज में.
Yeah,
200
he's
से भी ज़्यादा
there's a
है.
lot of background, but they,
You
towards
can
the end-
read the last 20 pages and get
Probably.
the message.
Yeah.
Yeah, right,
So-
something
so
like that.
Just check it out and see if it's good. You probably have a better sense of it than I do because I only just started getting into all this.
No, the funny thing is a couple of investments that I made, like, maybe 7-8 years back in safe companies for dividend, which I'm still getting the dividend from, but the capital is like 50% down. The only solace in those cases that yes, dividend is coming. So that's the effect of long-term investing, the way I have seen it here. If I had invested, say in 1990s when I came here, in some even blue chip stocks of those times, I say of those times because companies demerge, split, merge again, disappear, and so on. I have 100% confidence that I would not have any of them in my portfolio 20 years later. About investing in India, I invested in, like 20 companies, like, from in 80s. And the only company that I made money from, a handsome amount of money, was Hero Honda, Hero Motor Company, as they call it now.
Mhm.
I bought something like 50 shares in that company at whatever price, I don't remember. I think 50 rupees times 50 shares. 2,500 rupees shares I bought on the recommendation of a stockbroker. Like, Nanda, he was a Punjabi, so he said, Diwal sahab, ye stock le lo, acha rahega. Le le yaar, 2,500 rupees laga de. I'm talking about 84 or something. In all of 1990s, the dividend that was coming was around 1 lakh rupees every year. And finally, I had to sell for family commitments. For 25 lakhs, I had to sell the shares, which are today worth 50 lakhs. The good thing is that they gave on giving bonuses, every 3 years, 5 years. So those 50 shares became 1,600 or 1,700 shares when I sold them. And
so
after
DC, can you also, from your experience, talk about the anti-climax, meaning the opposite of a Hero Honda, where you really went bankrupt?
So
Because you always talk about the good one, talk about the bad one also to balance the story.
Because the thing is, as I say,
problem is everybody who talks about tips, they will talk about the success stories. Nobody talks about their failure.
That's why I'm holding him to the fire, right? Yeah.
Yes, no, you're not agree.
Good one.
Before I mentioned Hero, I said I invested in 20 stocks which are.
No, you did. I know you did. Give an example. Yeah.
Oswal Agro Mills.
Yeah. Went bankrupt or what?
Shri Ramakrishna or something, there are so many Oswal group companies. I don't remember. Tata Steel was another one. Tata Motors was another one.
So to Manian's point, let's say you put all the 20 stocks because 19 went kaput and one was really Hero Honda, was a hero. If you take the average of all 20, over this 25 years, how was your return? That's the point, right? So can you give us an idea?
I think the remaining was less than 1%.
Okay, so it was still positive at least.
2,500 became 25 lakhs when I sold them.
Right. And but others were 1%. Okay.
It is like Tesla, discovering a Tesla 20 years later. That's how you look at it. But
so Ramesh or anybody, if I don't have a will, so those 401k, all that money in the stocks, they will not go to the beneficiaries that are designated in those companies.
No, I will definitely make a claim on your.
It will go to. It will go to.
It will go to, right, Ram?
Yeah.
So if
in the 401k plan, if
suffered your friendship
goes
for
to
so many years, I will definitely make a claim on your assets.
So only thing that I've heard though, just for information for everyone here, that even if you have designated beneficiaries in all your portfolios, wherever they are, different companies, different institutions, banks and whatnot, the beneficiaries have to make a claim actually. So they don't go out and seek the beneficiaries, I have heard. So your kids, your spouse and all that, you have to make sure that they know where the money is. Okay. So that's something I learned new recently meaning a year ago, maybe, or so, year and a half ago. So even though you have the benefits.
Estate, Prabhat, you don't have to know the specific parts of your estate. They can just file a claim against your estate. Okay. If they say they are owed 20% of your estate, it could even be your charitable organizations that you're part of. If they can come after your estate. Okay, anybody,
All I'm
political,
saying is,
charitable, anything.
everyone has to make two parts to the will. One is a will in terms of what the estate is, and it doesn't cost much. Review it and update it. Go to a professional will writer, whichever country you're living in. Another one is make what is called a living will, because nowadays medical advances will keep you alive when you really don't want to be alive.
Right.
So therefore, and then emotions come into play when your next of kin has to make a decision, and they will not make a decision to switch it off. Well, actually, you are wishing it to be switched off, and your pain and everything else is going to be prolonged. So therefore, make a living will, which will tell you, the doctors and then your next of kin, what your wish is. There are two aspects. One is about your money, which you're passing it on to whoever you want to, and the other one is deciding how you want to go. That is very, very important. Many people don't make a decision on how they want to depart.
But is that legal in India? I don't think so.
I don't know about India. In UK, it is.
Same in the US.
Yeah.
Yes, Singapore also, yeah, you have that.
So Ramesh or Sanjeev Sharma here, if I don't have a will, doesn't mean that it's going to go to probate, as long as I have beneficiaries, right?
No.
It
At
is
least
always
Indian law is not that.
Say that, Manian, again. What did you say?
No, so there are these nomination and beneficiary facilities in the specific instruments.
Yes.
A will supersedes all of that.
All of this.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Will does. If you don't have a will.
All of that. 1 minute. And if there is no will, and if there is a dispute in the family, whatever the final decision on the sharing of the estate or the devolution of the estate happens through the court, supersedes therefore any beneficiaries that you have listed.
Okay.
So the problem is not, if there is no dispute in the family, there is no problem with the beneficiary system. But if there is a dispute, then the beneficiary system doesn't help you.
Okay.
Yeah,
So Manian, as a corollary, if there is no dispute in the family, then the beneficiary or the nominee, he will get it cool, no problem.
Yeah.
It's very
It will
unlikely.
arise only when there is a dispute. Yeah.
CP is
But
very unlikely,
Depends,
Yeah, especially Ramesh has declared he's going to go after my assets.
No,
It's
but
unlikely.
seriously,
Yeah, Ramesh.
in the US, there are so many organizations that look at obituaries.
Yeah, exactly.
There are many organizations that look at that. Okay, and if they are like, they were trying to grab money.
Yeah.
You have to protect, what you're trying to do is protect yourself from unscrupulous people.
Organizations trying to grab
people. It depends on the quantum of the money and your family situations and all that also. You have seen that when in some celebrities, suddenly claims come up that I was his wife and he used to live with me, blah, blah, all that claims come up. So all that can happen.
Yeah, with Tekri as well.
Rajesh Khanna is an example.
Rajesh Khanna, yes, yeah.
Rajesh Khanna is an example. I understand that, Manian.
Yeah.
No, there is this organizations coming. People work in charities, and along the way, somewhere along the line, they make a casual comment. Oh, I'll leave some money for you. Just say you make a casual comment, and that is registered, and the organization can come. It has happened in UK as well, where a cat lovers charity has come up and claimed for money, and it doesn't cost much to go and get a will made. Don't rely on.
अभी तक इतना नहीं होता है, लेकिन बॉस पैसा है तो हो सकता है ना.
हो सकता है, हाँ.
Correct.
Yeah, DC, you made a point about preferred stocks. Maybe sorry, Goswami, you did.
I have to go. So nice seeing all of you. Really nice seeing all of you.
All right.
Likewise.
Bye.
All right, Bruce, we'll catch up later.
Yeah, Bruce. Bye.
Bye, Bruce. Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Preferred shares ना इंडिया में बहुत नहीं होता है, तो कम होता है. The opportunity is less, but Singapore
US में ज्यादा है.
क्या चीज?
इंडिया में कम है opportunity, but जहाँ है वहाँ use करना चाहिए, because dividends are usually less taxed than other investment income in most places. and they are something like a thing between equity and debt, right?
Yeah.
The returns probably are
Hey,
tax
one last question, like, on this, if like in my case, for example, I'm a US citizen living in India. I have some properties in India. I have some assets in the US also. So do I need to write 2 wills or 1 will do?
No. There is no 2 will. It has to be 1 will, but it should be enforced. It should meet the regulatory requirements or legal requirements of both the jurisdictions.
Okay. Mhm.
So
Jeffrey
Goswami,
कुछ कह
your
रहा था
preferred
preferred share
stocks,
का? हाँ, बोल.
preferred stock, you buy it through your bank, like your bank, your agent? How
Yeah,
do
yeah,
you,
it's like any stock.
because preferred stocks I thought about few years ago, a few times, but I just couldn't think long enough to where to get it, how to get it.
नहीं, ये normal share के जैसे ही trade होते हैं. और preferred stock में भी, I mean, there are couple of interesting nuances. कि जो काफी सारी कंपनियां US में registered हैं, but their business is not in US, especially this shipping and LNG shipping, etc. So the companies are registered in US, but the business is outside US. Now, in which case, preferred share के ऊपर जो dividend pay करते हैं, that's not taxable for me. लेकिन दूसरी कंपनी है जो मतलब US में business generate कर रही है, उसके preferred stock में I will get taxed at 30%, like any other stock dividend. So you have to be mindful of, depending upon the company, how much you're getting taxed. But तुम तो US वाले हो तो तुमको अंतर नहीं पड़ता.
So how do you spot preferred stock, like where,
वैसे लिस्ट वगैरह आती है, ये वॉल स्ट्रीट वगैरह में रहती है.
योर वॉल स्ट्रीट जो प्राइस लिस्ट आते हैं उसमें प्रेफर्ड स्टॉक का सेक्शन ही होगा अलग.
हाँ, सेक्शन है.
Oh, okay. So for example, let's say GE, although GE is not doing very well, but GE के एक तो common stocks हैं, तो सबको GE उसका symbol भी है, तो उसके preferred stocks भी बिकते हैं with under some different symbol or something?
उसका है, I don't know that GE has issued preferred stock, but
Warren Buffett, I know, he bought GE preferred stock, when GE was about 22 or so. This is few years ago, after 2008, I think 2009-10 time frame. तो गोस्वामी, you might know, उनका भी कुछ symbol, ticker symbol होता है preferred stock?
नहीं, मेरे को GE का specifically
नहीं, not GE, anybody, any company. GE का भी same
बाकी कंपनी का होता है.
वो अलग होता है ना, preferred stocks का अलग.
yes.
Generally क्या है, कंपनी का जैसे GE होगा, GE के बाद में depending upon the coupon, it will be like 7% or 7.5%, क्योंकि कंपनी अलग अलग टाइम पे अलग अलग preferred stock issue करती हैं. So depending upon the coupon and the year of maturity, I mean, they will sort of designate it like that.
And should a company dissolve, or fold, then common stocks is the last one to get, right? So first the debt holders, and then preferred, and then common stocks.
Common is last, preferred is just before common.
In between, right? Yeah.
ऐसी कंपनीज में इन्वेस्ट मत करो यार, where you are lost in the queue.
प्रभात, GE का बहुत बुरा हाल चल रहा है.
GE का
छोड़ दे उसको. You try to find out how to get out of it.
नहीं, GE में तो है ही नहीं मेरा एक भी. मैं छोड़ दिया GE को 2015-16 में. मैं लिखा था ना वो स्टोरी में.
अच्छा, बहुत सही किया, बहुत सही किया.
हाँ, वो 28-30 पे बेच दिया मैं. मेरे पास
when I joined GE approximately 2012, उस समय उसका शेयर था $36-38, right? आज की तारीख में वो $8 है. 8.
हाँ, अभी 10 हो गया. अभी
now 10, yeah.
10 हो गया. ओके, हो सकता है. मैं काफी दिन पहले की बता रहा हूँ.
But I sold all my GE stocks at 42 in 2007 when my in-laws visited. At 42.
And that रह गया पीछे.
हाँ,
नहीं, मैंने खरीदा ही नहीं था यार. I didn't buy it.
And that was against my father-in-law's advice, who has been an investor since 70s. कि GE blue chip है, इसको रखो, इसको. So the moment he left actually for India, I sold it all. And in the hindsight, of course,
while he was in US, he influenced you not to sell, huh?
No, I just asked him because he used to do in India all the time. Not that, actually just a talk, not that, he asked me to, I mean, he didn't know what I was doing. लेकिन मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि ऐसे पूछ लिया उनसे तो निकल गए वो अपना, फिर मैं बेच लिया, एंड इन द हाइंडसाइट दैट इज द हाईएस्ट सो फार।